When you think about businesses that are selling through the roof, like Aloe or Allbirds, sure, you think about a great product, a cool brand, and great marketing. But an often overlooked secret is actually the businesses behind the business, making selling, and for shoppers, buying, simple. For millions of businesses, that business is Shopify. Nobody does online business better than Shopify. It's home of Shop Pay, the #1 checkout in the world. You can use it to boost conversions up to 50%, meaning way less carts going abandoned and way more sales going through to checkout. Sign up for your $1 per month trial period at shopify.com/income, all lowercase. Go to shopify.com/income to upgrade your selling today. That's shopify.com/income.
Roses were living the dream.
To you, my darling.
No, to you.
Until it all came crashing down.
You got fired.
Fired?
On August 29th, stop.
You stop!
And see The Roses. Rated R. In theaters everywhere, August 29th.
Thank you very much, everybody. Well, listen, hang on just for 1 sec. This next song now will have to be our last song for today. Well, the last song for the first show. So before we go, we'd like to say to everybody, thank you very much for coming. Thank you. Thank you. We hope you've enjoyed the show. Did you enjoy it? Yes. Oh, no. Thank you. Good. Is everybody happy? Right, then. We'd like to carry on with the song, which is the B-side of our latest record, and this song is called I'm Down.
Hello and welcome to episode 309 of Something About the Beatles podcast. And there's been a lot going on since the last new show was produced. Not that we really took an extended break, but there were things that happened like the Fest in Chicago, which I appeared at. And I got to see a lot of people, some who will be in upcoming shows. But I did want to take this moment to, number one, as always, if you're not already on the SATB newsletter, SATB2010 at Gmail, SATB2010 at Gmail. Get you on to the every Monday weekly newsletter, commenting on whatever's in the Beatle news, sharing some historic thing, and just otherwise announcements and things you need to know. I think I do a better job of conveying through the newsletter than on social media, which I pretty much these days only use for announcement of new shows, plus whatever happens to be in the news, like we've gotten in the last week or so regarding upcoming releases. And yeah, there's definitely a lot to talk about and parse out things that were announced, which you will see happening. I also wanted to say, just as an aside, that there will probably be a lot more content going straight to YouTube, but I will drop the audio into the feed because I've got kind of a backlog of guests I want to talk to, some that I see as suitable for full-length shows, and some maybe less so. Some that are discussions that I don't really see as justifying a whole show necessarily, an hour plus, but are good conversations worth having nonetheless. So the audio will go into the feed and the video will go on the YouTube channel. So there will be all that content to look forward to if you have a mind to. But in any event, Chuck Gunderson has been on the show once before, back around the time of the release of the 8 Days a Week film. And that was really more his commentary on the 8 Days a Week film. And I felt like we didn't really do full justice to the book he produced in 2014, Some Fun Tonight, a double-volume history of the 3 North American tours, richly illustrated and as thoroughly researched as you could hope for. Just everything you'd want to know about the American side of touring, and Canadian as well, during those years. So I had the opportunity to connect with him once again. We've known each other for probably at least that long. And we had a live taping at the Fest in Rosemont this August, and I wanted to catch him in person while I had the opportunity to do it. And we had people in the room, so it was a good situation to take advantage of his presence, and much better than the last time we tried such a thing at the Fest, which was with Aaron Weber a couple years back in a room adjoining the stage where music was playing nonstop. This was a floor away from that, and much better in terms of capturing the sound, as you will hear. So happy to do that. But some fun tonight, a terrific book, terrific history, and we've got the 60th of Shea's just happened, and we're sort of at the midpoint here between the 64 and 66 final tour. So I thought it was a good opportunity to talk with Chuck and just get kind of an overview. We'll probably have further conversations down the road because this was really kind of scratching the surface, but so many things to explore. And I do hope if you don't already own the book, you check it out at least, because it is so damn thorough and so beautifully put together. He did a hell of a job. And anyway, this is my conversation with Chuck.
Some Fun Tonight, 15 years ago now?
It was released 10 years ago, 2014.
Okay.
Yeah, that's the 50th anniversary.
Right, which makes total sense. But you started work on it
way before that. Gosh, I started work about 8 years before 2014. Yeah, so it was an 8-year process of doing that. And back then, the research was a bit difficult. Now, I think the most difficult research was Mark Lewis when he did his Beatles live book. I don't know how he did that. I mean, chronicling every concert the Beatles did, going into microfiche stacks and looking at those dates and all that kind of thing. A lot of information wasn't out there, but especially the photographs. The photographs were so difficult to find because, a newspaper would send out their photojournalism team and they would take, 10, 12, 15 pictures. They bring them back to the photo desk. Yeah, let's use that one and then just toss the rest. However, some saved them. We were talking about San Francisco 66. They sent, it was either the Chronicle or the Examiner that went out of business. So when they went out of business, they made a deal with the Bancroft Library that all the photos that newspaper ever took goes as a donation to the Bancroft Library in San Francisco. And I had heard about this photographer who had taken a bunch of pictures at Candlestick Park for the Examiner Chronicle, whichever one that was. And when he knew they were going bankrupt, he stole them from the archives of the newspaper and took them home with plans to auction them later on many years down the road. Well, he passed away, and then his wife found the photos and wanted to auction them. Somehow when I was in the preparation of the book, got wind of that. And I called the Bancroft and I said, hey, look, these really historic photos of the Beatles' last show in San Francisco are going to go for public auction. They got alerted. They got their lawyers on it, and they were able to rescue those photos for future historians to study. So if you ever go to the Bancroft Library, you can go online. You can see about 34, 35 photos of that last show, which I think they're better than Jim Marshall's. There's some great shots of them on stage, close-ups, really good stuff. So I'm really proud that I was able to save those for future historians to peer at and research and look at.
Kudos to you for being the right guy in the right place at the right time. That's the kind of stories we love to hear because so much has slipped through the cracks that might have been rescued and hasn't. So that's fantastic.
Remember this sound? This year, KYA welcomes the Beatles back to San Francisco in a mammoth Candlestick Park spectacular. The date is Monday, August 29th, and the place is Candlestick Park. You'll see better, you'll hear better, too, with a special Beatles sound system. See the Fabulous Four in the last show of their biggest American tour. Be part of the fantastic KYA reception for the Beatles. Don't be left out. Get your tickets now, just $5, $6, and $7, including all handling charges. Send your check or money order payable to KYA with a self-addressed stamped envelope. The time is now. The Beatles are coming, and they want you there. Come on, baby, now.
What was it that prompted you specifically to undertake what I would think in advance you must have known to be a massive undertaking which is a history of the Beatles' North American tours. Even though there was only 3 of them, you're talking a lot of cities, 2 shows a day, a lot of times, and the book is so completely richly illustrated visually. It's just unbelievable. It's just a staggering thing. And I would tell anybody here who hasn't seen Some Fun Tonight, it's one of those rare things in Beatle literature that if one guy can find a niche for himself that hasn't been explored before in any great depth and write a definitive volume on it. What comes to mind for me is Andy Babuick and the Beatles gear on their instruments. It's like nobody's going to better that book, and nobody's going to better Some Fun Tonight for a chronicle of the North American tours. So congratulations on that.
Thank you. Yeah, so it was really the product of coming to Beatle Fest. My first Beatle Fest was 1979 at the LA Bonaventure Hotel. Drove up from San Diego in my 1969 Volkswagen Carmen Ghia. I thought, oh my God, I was in high school. This is like Wonderland for me. My gosh, I could only afford maybe a bumper sticker or something back then. But, I'm going to the fest, knowing a lot of people, getting chummy with the authors. And really the person to break through on the Beatle book side was Bruce Spicer. He really started that whole thing. Obviously became good friends with Bruce, and then other authors started coming into the mix. And I would tell Bruce every time I saw him at Beatle Fest, I go, one area that's never been explored is the 3 tours of North America. Because I knew Bruce did these richly published, lavish books. And I said, I'd love to see that. And I must have, for 3-4 years, told him, you got to do that. That's going to be your next book. You should do it. And he goes, I'm just too busy with these other books. And so I kind of thought to myself, I was in the advertising career, but I have a master's in history from the University of San Diego. So I kind of, learned how to research and could go through library stacks and references and footnotes and all that kind of stuff. And I thought, well, why don't you do it? Why don't I do it? Never done a book before. I never had any idea. So I sat down with Bruce. How do you do this? What do you do? And one of the things I really wanted to do is I didn't want to have a publisher do it. I wanted to do it because I wanted 1,000%. And it's not like I'm a control freak, but I wanted control of the book. I wanted to show every show that they ever did. I wanted to have lots of really good photography. I wanted to have the performance contracts so people could read every word. I wanted to have the writers. I would devote a whole page just to a contract so they could read every word instead of this little thing in the corner.
Did they change a lot from show to show, or was there a standard that the Beatles adhered to?
So each year they had the performance contract itself, which gave out the monetary arrangements, but then they also had a writer. So, if Taylor Swift goes out on concert now, she's going to have probably a 20-page rider. The Beatles' rider was a page and a half. That was it. And all they demanded in that rider was clean towels, 4 cots, a portable TV set. And it wasn't even until the 1965 rider that they wanted 2 cases of soda. And they wanted mirrors in their dressing room. And then there's a couple other things spelled out with regards to the microphones, the lighting, the stage dimensions. Fencing would be required if there's fans sitting behind. Obviously, security, we want 50 policemen in 64. Well, in 65, it changed to 100 policemen because they realized all this stuff. They didn't have backstage passes back then. That was unheard of. In 64, when they toured, no one knew who was backstage. It was complete, uncontrollable, whatever. So in 65, Brian got smart, or the tour company that he worked with, which was called General Artists Corporation, all 3 years. They were a New York talent agency. They issued a pass. It was a white pass and it said Beatles ID. And they gave it to the support acts. They gave it to important journalists. They gave it to anyone that needed to be back within the realm of the Beatles area. And so they had to show that pass to get around. In 1966, they added even another layer of security because they're like, we're still not getting this. There's people back there we don't know, blah, blah, blah. So along with the white pass in 66, they also issued a red pass for the Beatles' inner circle. Brian Epstein even needed to have a red pass. The Beatles didn't have any passes of any sort, but Brian Epstein had to have one. Very important journalists that traveled the majority of the tour leg, like Ken Douglas, he would have one. The support acts obviously still had the white pass, but the red was just the inner circle of the Beatles for access in and out to them. And so, as you know, during this time, touring was just in its infancy. So many people bash on Brian. He didn't do this, he didn't do that, inventing it along the way. Luckily, he had GAC in New York who really knew the promoters, they knew the venues, they knew the hotels, they knew the air travel, the limousine, all that stuff. And so that's what he did to work on this tour and how to do it.
When you were talking about the added layer of security in 66, it reminded me of the story I'm sure you're well familiar with, of the enterprising group of young men who decided nobody would know what the opening acts really looked like anyway, and so hired a limousine and were able to basically get access to an area that they weren't able to.
Yeah.
Do you have that story?
Yeah, I mean, there's so many stories like that of young men trying to impersonate the Beatles. And this may have happened here in Chicago at Margies Candies. There may have been impersonators that could maybe pull that off to get access. It's a good gag, but all the different things that people were trying to do to get access to the Beatles, whether they were hotel maids or room service, or, I mean, literally, if you read Kent Womack's book, it almost seems like Mal Evans was up 24/7, just like roaming the halls and like sleeping with one eye open. You're not getting past this door, and all the things that they had to do to kind of control that.
I gather, knowing the way I do, that you're a very well-read Beatle fan, and you've been doing this stuff for years. Your fandom goes back to adolescence at least. When you were doing the research for this, you probably had a clear set of expectations about at least the broad parameters. What were the most surprising things you found along the way as you were doing the research?
One of the most surprising things is that the book was only supposed to be one volume. I'm like, I'm going to fit everything in one volume, right? 3 years of touring, not that many cities. Like, we'll get this done. And I'd go down, I had these people that I had hired to help me lay out things and things like that in the book. And every time I'd come to the meeting, I go, oh, I found this picture. Oh, I found this piece of memorabilia. Oh, I did this. Oh, there's this story I want to do. And he looked at me and goes, Chuck, because you're not going to fit it in one volume. You can't. I go, well, look, this could be the only book I ever do in my life. They're very expensive to do if you're going to self-publish. And I just decided, you know what? You only got one life to live here. I'm a fan first and foremost. I want to do what I wanted to do in a book from something I wanted. And I know that the fans that come to the fest and things like that they wanted to see. And so I just made this ultimate decision, like, okay, it's going to be 2 volumes. Now I look back and I say, I wish it was 3 because I found more stuff. Now, will I do it again? No, there's not room in the expanded edition. This is it.
Get Bruce on the case.
Yeah, get Bruce on the case. This is kind of it. So that surprised me that I did find more information.
Let's talk about, for the people that already own your book or will purchase it after this conversation, what's the kind of stuff that you found out afterward that didn't make it to the books that's cool and interesting?
Well, obviously a lot of new photos, thanks to Sarah. I mean, Sarah Schmidt is one of my gods in this business. She runs a website. It's like my Bible verse. I'm not a religious or anything, but it's like my Bible verse every day. It's like, get on Meet the Beatles for Real. Yeah. Sarah runs Meet the Beatles for Real. And it's a website. She doesn't get money for it. She spends a lot of her time, hundreds of hours. And go to that site every day and you'll see rare photos of the Beatles, both as the Beatles, as solo artists. I don't know where she finds this stuff, but I love it. Obviously, she's finding new stuff from the tour, like, oh my gosh, this answers a question I had or whatever, So there's that. There's a few other people that were maybe loosely connected with the tour that I've met along the way that had some interesting stories, some myths that were busted. I mean, I think I finally further busted a myth just this weekend, which, why are we still talking? Why are we still trying to figure this out 60 years on? Why do we not know what the set list was at the Paramount Theater? We're still trying to figure out, because there's a lot of talk that when they finally reached the end of the 64 tour, they did the charity gig at the Paramount Theater. And a lot of people think they dropped I Want to Hold Your Hand from that thing because the Beatles are the Beatles. They want to move on. They want to keep progressing. Like, we're not going to sing the same song over and over and over again. Like, we're going to drop it. Or the set might have been truncated because of the time. I'm still waiting for a program from Kansas City where some girl sat there and scrolled the songs down. Did they sing Kansas City? I reported in my book they did. I think it's a mistake. I don't think they did now.
I think the first place that I read that was in the Ron Schomburg book.
You would think they would do it. They're in Kansas City. They had been doing Kansas City since the Cavern days. It's an easy song. You don't got to rehearse it. It's just, hey, we're in Kansas City. Let's do the song. And Charlie Finley just paid us $150,000, 5 times over what any promoter on the 64 tour did. Let's give him an extra song. It's 2 minutes. Nope. So there's a guy I know. His name's Eric Taros, lives near Boston. He is the preeminent guy that has all the video of the Beatles on tour in America, consultant on 8 Days a Week. The 8 Days a Week, when it started, Ron Howard's a completely different vision. And I got involved in it very early on, way before any of the gelled and formulated. And their idea for that video or that movie documentary was to really document the Beatles' touring years and showing live footage. And when they realized that it wasn't out there, or people, collectors, wouldn't give it up for a princely sum of money, they decided we can't do it this way. We got what we got, and we're going to make kind of this retrospective documentary from roughly 63 to 66. And we'll bookend the later period, 67 on to the breakup. And that's it. So that's the problem.
You opened the door here to something I wanted to talk about, which is the theatrical showings of 8 Days a Week for the people who saw it, then had this appendage of a Frankenstein Together Shea Stadium concert. Do you know the current status of that? Why it hasn't come out yet? I've heard various things. You probably have more an inside track on exactly what the holdup is with that. And maybe you might even know if that version prepared for theatrical release is what we're going to get someday, because I will tell you, as beautiful as it looked, my ears told me right out of the box, I'm hearing the studio recording of Twisted Shout, Shea Stadium, and that's not acceptable.
I got to say, it was still fun to see it in the theater. I mean, I was like, wow. And I was at an IMAX theater, so it was even better. It was really great. But I agree with you. It's like, gosh, they got all this stuff. They gave us Hollywood Bowl. Why can't they just give us a kind of live retrospect of their live career? Why can't Peter Jackson clean up the Star Club tape, start there, give us that, give us the audio? Obviously, there's no video of that. Give us the audio and then morph it into Shea and other bits and pieces we have that we know is out there. We know better recordings exist than what they gave us at Hollywood Bowl. Better. I don't understand why they don't just let the fans participate in this process and give us a live retrospective. But I don't have any insights as to why they're not doing it. And I just hope and cross my fingers that one day they will.
One of our finest newspapermen, the #1 showman of the world, and most important of all, a truly great American, Mr. Ed Sullivan. Thank you very much, Sid. Now, ladies and gentlemen, honored by their country, decorated by their queen, and loved here in America, here are the Beatles. Here they come.
Well, hopefully New Blood at Apple will mean something. I don't know. I mean, I thought when they did Rock Band in 2009 and Danny Harrison had an influence in getting the Beatles into Rock Band, and suddenly, thank God for that, because now we've got Beatles stems, things that we did not have access to before. I thought this represents the new generation of Beatles. Once the Beatles were on the cutting edge of technology and presentation and all that, and at some point after the breakup, they started lagging behind. That's why you have Rhino better serving the Monkees back catalog than the Beatles is getting served to. I would imagine being more fandom in the world, but it's really sad. And Apple was kind of served as this black hole where they acquire things like the Quarrymen tape and things that we know to exist. There's a Cavern gig, apparently, July of '62, with Pete Best on drums, that you're never going to hear as long as they have their current way with things, even though we've got the technology to make it eminently listenable. And it's historic documents, besides.
Well, I'm a person that looks at life glass half full, so I'm looking at new leadership at Apple. I mean, Jeff's been there a long time. He got out, and they got a new guy there. There's a new sheriff in town. Younger guy, let's see what he does. I'm interested. Do I want to see more commercials for Downy sheets with Beatle music in it, or Coca-Cola? Probably not. I don't think he's going to go in that direction. I think he appreciates the legacy.
Yeah. Then there are people that at least their line for justifying what they do is, I don't want the legacy to be forgotten.
Yeah.
I'm looking at you, Sean Lennon.
And I think that will be a big key, is having Sean Lennon involved, of having even Julian with a word into Sean, Danny, the McCartney family, other people getting involved,
So we're upon the 60th of Shea Stadium, and that gets all the glory and attention because it was filmed, it was a TV broadcast, and it was the kickoff. Just imagine that as a touring band, the first show of your new this year tour in North America is the stadium show before a bigger crowd you've ever played before. By the way, it's going to be broadcast for TV. What is there to say about what went into the decision making of they're going big in '65? It's something as simple as fan demand, that you were going to sell this many tickets, therefore you have to up your game? Or did Ryan want to scale up his ambitions for these guys?
Yeah, so I think 1964 tells us that story, because in 1964, General Artists presented Brian back in March, April-ish of '64, mostly March, presented him a list of proposed venues, dates, gate prices, all that kind of thing. It's like a 6-page document. It's got like tea stains over it. It's got Brian's check marks, notes. I present that whole 6-page thing in my book of what Brian had to think about. And what surprised me in looking at that proposed itinerary list from GAC was that they wanted the Beatles to play large venues in 1964. So they proposed Boston's Fenway Park, held about 35,000 at the time. They proposed Detroit's Tiger Stadium, which held 50,000 at the time. They proposed the LA Coliseum with 80,000 seats. And along with that, it said in conjunction with Disneyland. And I always wonder, what does Disneyland have to do with the Beatles in 1964? I mean, they're this clean company and they want to associate themselves with these long-haired, rebel guys. And I finally put that together. This is a new piece of information that I finally gathered, and I think probably what happened. It wasn't about the Beatles going to Disneyland. It was about the Beatles staying at the Disneyland Hotel while they were in LA. Now, did Walt Disney own the Disneyland Hotel? No, he didn't. He owned the park. but the hotel belonged to his partner. His partner was a guy by the name of Jack Rather. So if you know the Lone Ranger, he was kind of behind that concept of the Lone Ranger, kind of an entertainment guy, wheeler dealer in LA. Well, what I found out about Jack Rather was that he was also on the board at Capitol Records. So obviously he knows the Beatles are coming back. Obviously he's a publicity hound. Obviously he wants the new big thing to stay at his hotel, the Disneyland Hotel. And a lot of people think the Beatles maybe sneaked into the Tiki Room. For our Disneyland fans out there, I'm from California, so obviously Disneyland's my backyard. I don't think the Beatles went to the Tiki Room while they were there, but they did not stay at the Disneyland Hotel.
There's an irony there.
Yes.
Of where the Beatles ended officially at the end of 74.
Yes.
At Disney World.
Disney World.
At the Tiki.
Breaking up.
Yes.
At the Tiki Room. Yeah. Right. But I don't think they were there in 64. There's a few places that we'll talk about that they just weren't there. There's a famous hamburger stand in LA called Bob's Big Boy, and they have the booth dedicated to them. The Beatles sat here. They were never there.
Sounds familiar.
Never there. But anyway, so GAC is proposing to Brian all these gigantic venues, and Brian's kind of sitting here thinking, okay, well, to date, at this point, the Beatles had played to, I think the largest venue in the UK was 8,000 seats. They go down to Australia where they perform before 10,000. When they get to America, are we going to make that jump to 80,000 people? And this is, I think, where Brian's intuition or his lack of taking advantage, let's say. Most rock and roll managers seem to kind of take advantage of their artists. I think Brian was a real different type of person with that. I don't think he was really looking at the bottom line and how much he's going to make. And these guys are a flash in the pan and I'm going to make as much as I can. I think he really cared for him and he kind of wanted to go step by step. So instead of choosing these large venues, he chose places like the Hollywood Bowl, which seated 18,000. He chose places like the Baltimore Civic Center, Cincinnati Gardens, Dallas Memorial Auditorium. You know, it's kind of in that sweet spot, 12 to 18,000. He did in 1964, though, did choose 3 stadiums. He chose Empire Stadium in Vancouver, which only held 20,000 people, so a very small stadium. I don't really count that as a stadium. It was open air. And then he also played Kansas City Municipal Stadium, which at the time held 45,000 people. That was the Charlie Finley show where they add-on show, $150,000. How many people showed up? 25,000 to a 45,000 seat stadium. And they also played the Gator Bowl, which at the time held 60,000 people. But I think Brian looked at that more as a regional show. Like, I'm going to draw from Atlanta and from Miami and from Tampa and from all these places around. And even at the Gator Bowl in 64 on September 11th, they sold 32,000 seats. Now, there was a hurricane, Dora, which had passed through previously, you know, kind of in the aftermath of Dora. I still have some ticket stubs like raindrops on them and things like that. So who knows? The Gator Bowl could have been more. I don't know. So I think Brian was really great at holding the demand, like giving the people what they wanted, but then gauging the success of the whole thing. And then, obviously, it was successful, right? They made a lot of money on that first tour, $1.2 million. I don't know what that is in today's money. It's a lot of money. They come back, 65 turns around the calendar year. Brian starts thinking, okay, we got to go out and tour again. You know, I'm going to start putting everything together. They got the Europe thing going on. They got UK stuff going on. And then obviously they're going to come back to America. So GAC obviously sends them another itinerary sheet. And Brian at that point probably feels, I'm going to do this. I'm going to kind of play bigger venues. I feel safe to do that. Obviously, Shea was the first, you know, New York is everything to the Beatles. It's the beating heart of the Beatles, right? Like everything happens in New York. And of course, Sid Bernstein being who he was, just this guy that was a promoter and I'm going to do this and I'll buy the unsold seats and you're going to do this. Which another mystery is, why didn't Sid Bernstein get the New York show in 64? Because Brian was very loyal to his promoters. He gave Eubanks all 3 years. He gave Catalana in San Francisco 2 years in a row. He gave the Triangle Productions in Chicago all 3 years. So why didn't Sid get anything in 64? I mean, he took a risk at Carnegie Hall. He didn't get anything. He didn't get the Forest Hills show. He didn't get the Atlantic City show. So Sid comes back in 65, resurfaces. I want to do this major big thing. And so, yeah, I mean, they had proposed it in 64. Brian said, I'm not ready. In 65, I'm ready. Let's do this. And of course, we all know what happened. I don't think we need to go into it. 55,600 people. The Beatles make over 300,000 gross. They take home 180,000 net. You know, it's filmed. Ed Sullivan's there. Mick's there, Keith's there, the Rascals are there, Linda McCartney's there, Barbara Bach's there, Meryl Streep's there. She's just being a kid in the audience, and they're interviewing kids, and Meryl Streep's getting interviewed as an unknown kid. In 66, actually, she's interviewed, but I mean, she was probably there in 65, I'd imagine. But there was a great interview of her in 66. Or she wasn't interviewed, she's just sitting there like...
She's the friend.
She's the friend, yeah, like that. And we all know what happened. So a lot of people think that kind of after Shea, like everything was sold out. Every stadium they went to was sold out. And that is just not the case.
Well, it's interesting that they could have, if they restricted it to a single show, but instead they were doing afternoon and evening shows for a lot of that tour. They didn't do it at Shea. Is there any particular reason you would think, just because that was a singular event?
Yeah, so the difference was, if they were to do a double show that day, it would be at a Coliseum. So if they're going to do a stadium, like they go to Atlanta, so they go to Shea, they go to Toronto, which is a hockey arena, an auditorium that fits 16, 17, 18,000. They're going to do 2 shows in those type of venues, and they go down to Atlanta, which is 55,000 seat stadium. They're going to do 1 show. Then they go to Sam Houston, another indoor, Sam Houston Coliseum, another indoor venue. They do the 2 shows. Now they come up to Chicago, which they played at White Sox Park, and they did 2 shows there, and that's a stadium, baseball park.
Yeah, it was interesting. I looked into that because I know one show was much bigger than the other in terms of attendance, but together, added together, it was more than Shea.
Yeah, and it's interesting that kind of the afternoon shows that they did were always like less people. Like if you take Memphis in 1966, 15,000 seat arena, like for the afternoon show, like 7,000 people show up. But then the evening show, the whole thing's like 12,583 or something. It's like all sold out. Yeah. I don't get it.
Like a 1980s Cub game.
Yeah. So, yeah, it's like, oh, the White Sox are playing. I don't want to see them. The Cubs are playing. Yeah, we're all going to that type of thing.
Thank you very much, everybody. Thank you. We'd like to...
I hate to... Look, we've got to back some of the people up. There's been 2 kids crushed already. They'll have to cancel the show. They have to cancel the show. Hold it. Down. Everybody down. Or no show. The Beatles want to perform for you, but they can't do it. If you don't sit down now, let's sit down. They want to perform for you. Come on.
We'd like to ask you if you'd help us with this next song. Hello. We'd like to ask you if you'll join in. Will you join in with this next one? Will ya? Okay. All right, listen, it's dead easy. All you got to do is clap your hands or stamp your feet, something like that, or sing, do anything you like. The song's called Come Buy Me Love.
There's a lot been said about Shea. Unfortunately, we don't know what status is in terms of release. Is there any particular stories attached to it you've uncovered in talking to people that were there and doing the research you've done that aren't widely known?
I don't think so. I think everything has been said about Shea and what the impact was on the history of rock music. We do know that the jacket that Paul McCartney wore, the Shea Stadium coat with the badge, like there's a collector at the fest that had that for many years, 20 years. got it legitimately through an auction. And he sold it last year to a very well-known person that we all know in this room. And it's like 50 times more than he paid for it. So we know that that coat is going to be preserved for history because the person that bought it respects the Beatles and their legacy. So hopefully one day in a museum somewhere, we'll get to see that coat. We had it in our exhibit with the Grammy Museum, Ladies and Gentlemen, the Beatles. We had that coat on display for 10 years. It's awesome.
Unlike John's.
Yeah, and we don't know where the badge is. Like, where are they? I think Julian still might have his because there's pictures of Julian wearing that Shea Stadium badge.
The one? Okay.
Yeah, so I'm sure it might be in Julian's possession. The other badges, we don't know, and it's hard to authenticate them now because it's just there's no numbers on them. It's just a badge. So who knows where they're at?
After the show, they were told they didn't need those stinking badges.
George was wearing his on his hat, remember, in the transit lounge at wherever they flew out of New York, if it was JFK or LaGuardia.
I'd like to introduce to you a couple of extracts from recordings we made immediately after the first sensational concert in the Shea Stadium, New York, which was attended by 55 or somewhere between 55 and 60,000 teenagers, the biggest audience that any single live entertainment act has ever drawn to one concert anywhere in the world. And after it was over, we were relaxing in the Beatles Hotel suite, and I asked John Lennon to give us his after impression.
Well, it was marvellous. It was the biggest crowd we ever played to.
Was it really?
Yeah.
Even counting Australia?
Yeah, anywhere in the world. It was the biggest live show I think anybody's ever done, they told us.
Yes. I'm sure
and it was fantastic, And it was just great. They could almost hear us as well, even though they're making a lot of noise, because the amplification was
It was
terrific,
very good,
yeah.
Actually. I must confess I could only distinguish about 3 of the numbers, which I happen to know and could hear.
Yeah, well, the well-known ones you can pick up.
That's right, yeah. By and large, you thought it was an exciting show.
Yeah, it was marvellous, it was the most exciting we've done.
So one of the shows that fans of a certain age that grew up on 1970s bootlegs is well familiar with is the Sam Houston shows. What can you tell us about that? Because just on the audio evidence, I don't even know if it was filmed. I have no idea. I've seen a few pictures from it, which are not the ones on the jacket. That's Shea 66. But the show keeps getting stopped. And there were 2 shows that day, different performances. And Russ Knight, Weird Beard, is kind of emceeing the show.
Yeah. It's on the names on the ticket.
Yeah. What have you found out about that? More than we hear on the record?
Please, ladies and gentlemen, please. Please, if you would you move back? Quiet, please. People are getting hurt on the front 2 rows. The show will be stopped if you don't move back. This is the Houston Security Beatle Division. Move back, please. I've been told to make this announcement. The show will be stopped if you don't move back in the first 2 rows. And the fellow on my right, okay, go on. Just move back, please. Okay.
Oh, thank you very much. That was wonderful. Next song I'm going to do is the title song from the latest film we've made. And it's also our new record. And it's called Help!
Not much more than what we already have. I haven't heard of any film that surfaced of it. Eric hasn't found anything. And it's just so weird that these guys, this is the height of Beatlemania at this time. This is like Taylor Swift coming through your town now. Like, no one had that kind of stuff, 8 millimeters and kids bringing 8 millimeter video cameras and all that. It just didn't exist. But we know that some venues, like the staff at the venue, the team or whatever, recorded these things. Like Piers, he has the entire 1965 Maple Leaf Gardens performance, support acts, everything. We know everything that happened. And he also has, because the mics were on different channels, I don't know, I'm not a technology person, but they're on different channels or something.
He's got multi-tracks?
Something like that, where he can hear each Beatle talking to the other Beatle.
Oh,
like, oh, wow, it's really hot in here, or this shit, or I don't know. So Piers has this thing. He was supposed to, did you see that, Sarah, this morning? Did it break down or something, I heard?
Yeah.
Tell us.
Sound wasn't working.
Okay.
So he told us the whole story.
Yeah.
Said, let's listen to
Yeah.
it.
We heard Sounds Incorporated.
So he got us all excited, and then he pulled the rug under us because it was technology. Something happened with technology there. But we did get to hear Sounds, which is cool.
It was cool.
You know, that's cool. I mean, Sounds Incorporated, you know.
Are you ready, fellas? Ladies and gentlemen, here they come right now. Let's bring on Sounds Incorporated, ladies and gentlemen. Come on, cousins. Sounds Incorporated. Here we go. Great.
So, doing the research for the book, were there any holy grails, things out there that you desperately wanted to get access to that were just beyond reach, or things that you knew to exist and no longer did?
Yeah, so obviously I wanted to interview the surviving Beatles, you know, I mean, but they're not going to do that. But I did get to a couple people in the inner circle. I mean, I got to Tony Barrow, had a long chat with him before he died.
Did you ask him about his Candlestick tape?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, Paul says, I want to record this thing. And I can do that. He goes, Paul said, set it right here. You can see pictures of it in the Bancroft photos, which the Marshall photos don't show it. And it's literally right there. And sadly, it runs out of tape. And I think it's just such a fitting ending to the tour. Like, we want the whole thing, but for some reason, maybe I don't want the whole thing. It kind of adds to the lore of the whole thing, if you know what I mean. Like,
missing out on In My Life?
Yeah. You know, and did he strum In My Life? I don't know. Did they pose for pictures on stage? No. People say that they took a group photo on stage while they're in between songs. I'm like, okay, we have the great selfie of John putting his 35 millimeter on the amp and like taking a fisheye picture of him.
I'd love to see the rest of that roll.
Yeah, they never took a group photo on stage or sang In My Life, or I just think they did their thing and they left. That was it. They got in the armored car and they show images of them in the armored car in the 8 Days a Week movie, and that was it. That was the end of the tour.
There's bits of tipping their hand that you hear in that tape.
Lovely working with you, Ringo.
Yeah. And also, I always wonder, and Sarah and I were talking about this last night, why did they have this steel cage around them? No other venue did that. I mean, they're at Dodger Stadium the night before, and it's the second base stage that's totally open. Why at San Francisco did they put this steel enclosed cattle cage almost around them? And it wasn't the same promoter that did 65 Cow Palace. It was a different promoter, Big Daddy Donahue, that did 66. And Catalana would have gotten the 66 show had Big Daddy Donahue not sued Brian Epstein, because Big Daddy apparently in 64 was told he was going to do the show, and Epstein later gave it to Paul Catalana. And so in 65, he was served with a summons while the plane landed at San Francisco, threw it into the limo, you've been served. And so Brian had to do the 66 show with Big Daddy Donahue at KYA Radio. So was it the remembrances of other people that in 65, that Cow Palace show was crazy? I mean, people on the stage and pulling people off and debris. And granted, it's a different type of environment. It's a arena.
Yeah. Was that the show where you see the famous photos of the cops carrying the prostate? Yeah.
Yeah. And Mal and Alf up there clearing the stage and the DJs. And I have a picture of my book of a woman holding a chair above her head. I mean, it was just nuts. So maybe there were remembrances of that. Maybe people were thinking, okay, well, this is the last show of the tour.
The hysteria was most obvious in San Francisco at the final concert of the 65 tour. After it, John told how he gets personally involved with an audience.
If you can see them, it does, if you've got any sort of feelings at all, you can't help being sort of moved by somebody crying. If you know definitely they're crying for you, if somebody's sort of crying and shouting, you're not sure whether it's you, Paul, or whoever, you can't really get involved. But if you sort of catch somebody that's watching you, you do feel something. I saw one little girl that was just crying and shouting, and I felt sorry for her for a moment. Thought, she's only about 16 or something. She's getting crushed, but she was just standing there throwing handfuls of these little rocks at me. And I sort of shouted to her, well, they feel like little rocks, and I shouted to her. She just took no notice, and she seemed to be waving at me. I was trying to say, look, I'm here, I'll smile at you, just don't hurt me, you're going to knock my eye out.
I interviewed so many fans that missed the 66 tour because of something in their life. And they said, don't worry, we'll see him in 67. That never happened.
That was what I was wondering, because we know, wasn't it due to some kind of distribution snafu that the 66 Shea show undersold? There were tickets that could have been sold that were sitting somewhere, just didn't get out there.
Yeah, so there's a great clip in Anthology of Ringo, when there's this newspaper reporter at the 66 Shea show, and he goes, well, the bloom is off the Beatles. Last year, 55,000 people. This year, maybe 45. And then they go right to Ringo and goes, oh, gee, the Beatles only sold 45,000 seats. We're a failure. We're miserable. It's all over for the Beatles. You remember that? It's like drawing that many people in 66 to a rock concert was a big deal. No one else could do that. Can you name another band of the time that could have done that, even close? You're agreeing. There's no other band. The Stones, if they came in
66 now. I mean,
how many would they
get? If you judge by record sales,
yeah.
I mean, maybe Dylan. I don't know.
Could Dylan attract 30,000 people?
It's a different kind of audience. It wouldn't be screaming.
Could the Stones? Could the Byrds? Could
Herman's Hermits?
Herman's Hermits. I don't know. I mean, you're talking about a whole nother stratospheric level. You're talking about something you can't even compare.
Maybe the Monkees.
Yeah.
Maybe, but the Monkees did go out in 67 or 67 when they opened with Jimi Hendrix.
Yeah.
Because I know they were playing like stadiums like Forest Hills, the tennis stadium. I think they were kind of in that first year that the Beatles were in 64. So they're going to play arenas and all that kind of stuff and hopefully build up to that. But they never did, obviously.
No. Do you have any theories on why Candlestick was so undersold?
Yeah, so it's kind of interesting. So they originally, for 66, I have a telegram in the book that they obviously were going to do Cow Palace, 2 shows at the Cow Palace. And then someone somewhere said, why do we got to do 2 shows at the Cow Palace? Let's do 1 show at Candlestick and we're done. I don't know if the Beatles had input to that. I don't know if Brian had input to that. But somewhere, somebody switched it from the Cow Palace to Candlestick. Now, was there advance warning of that? Maybe they didn't get the word out in time, because I know this is an instance in San Diego, my hometown. Like, they sell out Shea Stadium like 10 days earlier, 55,000 seats, and they come to my stadium in San Diego, where the Chargers play, is called Balboa Stadium, which held 28,000. And they sell 17,000 seats on the 65 tour. Like, why? I mean, they're at the height of, why doesn't everybody want to go?
Were there 2 shows?
No, it was 1 show. And the reason is because San Diego is actually another add-on. The West Coast promoters actually passed on the Hollywood Bowl in 1964. They were the biggest promoters on the West Coast. It was Lou Robin and Alan Tinkley. West Coast Concerts, they called it. Concerts West or something. And GAC came to him and said, hey, we got this band, the Beatles. We want to put them at the Hollywood Bowl in 64. And they said, 18,000 seats for this British band coming through? I don't think so. And they passed. And that's
pre-Sullivan or after Sullivan?
This is after Sullivan.
And so even despite 73 million pairs of eyes,
they felt like they couldn't fill the Hollywood Bowl. Huh. So in steps Bob Eubanks. So Eubanks gets the 64 Hollywood Bowl show, he gets the 65 Hollywood Bowl shows, and he gets 66 Dodger Stadium because Brian really rewarded the loyalty of promoters.
KRLA KRLA disc jockey Casey Kasem. KRLA disc jockey Bill Slater. And that wild and wonderful Italian Dick Biondi. And now, here they are, the Beatles!
Hello, 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 hello. Hello, hello. Hello, hello. Hello.
So these West Coast guys, Lou Robin and Alan Tinkley, when the tour is announced in 65, and they know LA's gone to Eubanks, they want a show from GAC. They're begging, and they're a big client of GAC's. They're like, we want a show. And, it's like, well, the tour's already set. We want to please you, but let's figure this out. And so they come back to him in June, and they say, okay, Lou Robin and Alan Tinkley, we couldn't get you a show, and you have a choice. You can either do it in San Diego or you can do it in Salt Lake City, Utah. Which one do you want? They decided they were going to play where the Utes play, University of Utah. It's Eccles Stadium now. But they said, well, we're just up the road from San Diego. We're obviously going to take San Diego. So San Diego wasn't even announced till June. So they only had this short window to kind of promote San Diego. And there was a lot of competing, misleading information. Plus, San Diegans already bought their seats for the Hollywood Bowl because they're doing 2 nights. That's 36,000 there. So a lot of San Diegans drove up to LA to see those Hollywood Bowl shows. And then, of course, they meet Elvis on the 27th in LA at his Bel Air home. And then they come down by bus to San Diego to do that show. 17,000 people show up, 10,000 empty seats. And then they get the bus, they do the concert, they get in the bus, they're ready to take off, the bus doesn't start. And the promoters blamed it. They said, we had a bus for you, but the Beatles entourage says, we want to get our own bus. Well, that bus wasn't that great. So they're trying to start it. The fans are like running from the stadium through the infield to try to get to the bus. Luckily, it starts. It's halfway up the road, away from the fans, it breaks down. And they park it in a back of a mortuary. The mortuary is still there in San Diego. Parking lot I still see. And somehow they did something, got the bus going, and off back to LA they went.
What did you see of San Diego on the way in?
We saw the freeway. That's all. The curtains were open.
The curtains were open, but
we saw the sea.
Yeah. Yeah.
We saw lots of things.
Back there in the pink.
Yes.
Disneyland. Oh no. Have you enjoyed your US tour so far?
Yeah, it's been good because it's just long enough for us not to get too tired and fed up. It's just the right length.
Did you get to see this show?
No, I was too young. I was only like 2.5 or something. So I was born in 62.
All right.
Yeah, 62. But my sister, who's 18 years older than me, she goes, the Beatles, I'm going to go see Jimi Hendrix in 67. So she saw Jimi Hendrix at Balboa Stadium in 67, yeah. So, yeah, it's just all that kind of weird stuff that happens. So Candlestick was the last show, and I don't know why 25,000 people came. Maybe it was the whole, well, we saw him in 64, we saw him in 65. We'll see him in 67. We'll come back, and maybe we want the Cowbells again. This is too big or something. I don't know.
Yeah, it's interesting. I mean, they document the weather as being really unseasonably cold that night, but...
Oh, I've been in San Francisco during the summertime, and I'm like, this is freezing. And you know the Mark Twain quote, obviously. And Mark Twain said the coldest winter I ever spent was a summer in San Francisco. So it's probably one of those nights.
I was wondering if you have any insight. You said that Bob Eubanks did produce all 3 LA shows, and in 66 they upscaled to the Coliseum. Was there any reason they didn't try to record that show as Capitol did the other 2 years of LA shows with the Beatles, since they were sitting on the tapes for 64 and 65, feeling like they hadn't got what they wanted yet, that they didn't give it a third try?
My only thinking is they're going from a Hollywood Bowl, which is a much more confined beautiful venue. I mean, if you've never seen a show at the Hollywood Bowl, try to do that once in your life. It's just amazing.
Stood on that stage.
It's an amazing place. But I think, it's the upgrade. We're going to a 45,000 seat baseball stadium.
And not suitable for recording.
Probably not.
Okay. I was wondering how serious Capitol's intents were.
I don't even think they even gave it a thought. We kind of got our opus. Let's keep that. Why do we got to do any more?
Up until the Beatles obviously knew, and at some point, probably after More Popular Than Jesus, they made the decision, we're not going to do this anymore. I think people pointed to whatever it was, the show that got rained out and they had to do 2 in 1 day. At some point, Paul said, that's it. Okay, fine, I'm with you guys. We're not doing this anymore. Had there been any kind of planning for 67 that ended up being shut down by the Beatles deciding we're not doing this?
Yeah, so Mark Lewison kind of helped me out on this because we were having a discussion back and forth on this one day. And Mark's under the impression that Brian Epstein kind of almost had to kick him out the door to go on the 65 tour. They were kind of done after 64. John commented after that 64 American tour, like, we'll never do another tour like that again. I'm in 32 shows, 33 days, traipsing all over America. And obviously, they're starting to go into the studio. They're finding the wonders of the studio, what they can do in the studio. The Beatles, as we know, they never want to stay in the same place. They want to keep going and elevating. Obviously, sound technology is not keeping up with them. And obviously, when you want to go out and tour, you want to play new songs, things like that. And the stuff they're recording or beginning to record at the time, it's just like, we can't reproduce this on stage. We don't have the technology. So they're kind of like bootstrapped or whatever on that. And I just think touring was, by 65, they're done. They got out on that 65 tour. They did it. They come back. And then, there's more beautiful music being made in the studio. There's more improvements in sound technology and tracking and all this stuff. And 66 comes along and it's like, I think the 3 of them, Ringo, John, George, are like, yeah, this is done. I think Paul had his performer mind on, like, we got to keep touring, keeps us sharp, all this stuff. And then there's that flashpoint. He said it. I don't know if it was true. He said it, but kind of around the middle of the 66 tour, he threw his hat in and said, yeah, I agree with you guys. Could it have been earlier? Maybe. I don't know. But they held in there. They did it. They were professional. They didn't let the promoters down. And prior to that 66 tour and after the Jesus statement, Brian was prepared to cancel the entire tour. He was totally prepared, ready to lose money, ready to give the promoters their money back. Flew in for the press conference before that tour, at the hotel in New York. And had to do the whole...
I was in fact standing their way.
Yes, exactly. Like, hey, it's a taken out of context. But he was prepared to cancel it.
So no from GPA or anybody else had any propositions for 67 that made it to the Beatles that were then shut down, or did the word get out?
I think after 67, that was it. I think the Beatles just put their foot down and said, that's it, we're not touring again.
Yeah. So you've had 11 years since the book's been out. Is there anything nobody has asked you that you really wanted to talk about?
That's a good question. There's sex on the tour? I don't know. I don't know any of that, and that's why I didn't even go there. I didn't even go in the book with their late night dallying around or anything like that.
The Beatles tours were like satirical. We had that image, but man, our tours were like something else. If you could get on our tours, you were in, They were Satyricon, all right. Just everywhere. Satyricon, just think of Satyricon only with 4 musicians going through it. Wherever we went, there was always a whole scene going. We had our 4 bedrooms separate from, tried to keep them out of our room, and Derek and Neil's rooms were always full of junk and hooers and fuck knows what, and policemen and everything. Satyricon, we had to do something. And what do you do? The pill doesn't wear off when it's time to go. You just go. I used to be up all night with Derek, whether there was anybody there or not. I just couldn't ever sleep. Such a heavy scene it was. Like anybody, they're all into now, but they didn't call them groupies then. They called it something else. Well, if you couldn't get groupies, we'd have whores and everything, whatever was going, you know.
Who would arrange for all that stuff?
Derek and Neil, that was their job, and Mal, but I'm not going into all that.
Business on the convention.
Oh, sure it was. I mean, when we hit town, we hit it, you know. We're not pissing about.
And Margies Candies, like, hey, it's here in Chicago. Maybe we should end with Margies Candies.
Yeah, sure.
Okay. So as you know, Margies Candy is a pretty popular, back in the day, maybe still is today, ice cream candy shop in Chicago. It's in between White Sox Park and where the Beatles stayed at O'Hare Sahara Inn. Manny Scar's.
Yeah.
That's Sahara. Yeah, Manny Scar, he's a gangster. Okay, Manny Scar, like 2 weeks after the Beatles stayed there, got assassinated because he wasn't up on his construction loans or gambling. I don't know.
That place had been bombed more than...
Totally. Exactly.
So
I don't...
Who the hell was putting them up there?
I have no idea.
For their safety.
Why didn't they put them in the Loop?
Right.
I have no idea. Astor Towers, they were there the next year. I don't know why. Maybe it was close to O'Hare. It's in Schiller Park. So
yes, but it's still gangland.
Yeah, right. So they're staying in this weird kind of hotel. So Margie's is right in the middle. Makes sense. White Sox Park, get on the Kennedy Expressway, stop at Margie's, go back home, right? Back to the Sahara. And so I thought, well, I'm going to go to Margie and check this place out, you know. So we got some Beatle friends, one Beatle Fest, and said, let's go to Margie's. And we did. And the story is they stopped there, they got out of their limousines, they went in, and they had these things that Margie's was famous for called Atomic Blaster Sundaes, gigantic sundaes. And several girls came along. And we're able to sit in this booth, you know, and I'm kind of looking at this booth because they have the dedicated Beatle booth there, the plaque and all that, like Bob's Big Boy does, which they were never there. And there's like, it's on a corner, so there's like windows on one side of Margie's Candies, and there are windows on the other side of Margie's Candies. And I'm thinking, how do they pull this off? Like, you're talking about the height of Beatlemania, tight neighborhood, not a lot of space. A lot of viewing area. A lot of people would have been there. A lot of people would have been taking photographs. I'm assuming.
There's nothing discreet about that place.
Nothing. Exactly.
Done on State Street.
Yeah, so I walk in. You know, at some point I had a long conversation with the owner, who wasn't the original owner, it's the son. He goes, oh, I got pictures of it. You do? Like, I'm coming down this weekend. Can I see him? Sure. I'm super excited. Like, okay, I'm going to finally figure this out, right? I get there, talk to the guy, Peter, and he goes, yeah, here's the photos. And I'm looking at him and go, well, these are photos of them in England, like just stock photos. He goes, well, they were here. I was a kid and they were here. I'm like, okay. I didn't want to like get into it with them. I'm like, have your memory, you know what I mean? But okay, there's no photos exist. I researched every Chicago newspaper, you know, like the gossip columns and things like that, Guy About Town or what. I read through all of those. You would think Beatles are at Margie's Candies. Nothing. So I'm at the sing-along last night. It's 2 a.m. And this woman by the name of Georgiana, what's her last name? Who knows? Georgiana. She got befriended by Mal during the 64 tour, Sarah? Okay.
Is that a euphemism?
Could be a euphemism. I don't know. But she became friendly with Mal. And he felt comfortable with her. They became pen pals. And Mal got her in to see the Beatles, right? In 64, did she get into the room?
65.
Okay, 65 she did. And I have pictures on my phone of that. And there's pictures of her in the room with the Beatles at the Sahara O'Hare Hotel, Manny Scar. So I'm asking her last night, 2 a.m. I go, Georgiana, I go, like you went to the evening concert at White Sox Park, right? She goes, yeah, of course I was there. And then you went back to the hotel room and got inside the Beatles because pictures of you, right? And she goes, yeah, and I have the picture. So I know she's telling the truth. And I said, did you leave like right after the concert? She goes, yeah, pretty much. A little bit later, you know, you had to traffic and all that stuff. And I said, okay. And when you got back to the Sahara, were the Beatles there? She goes, yeah, they were there. Like George had just gotten out of the shower. He'd washed his hair. She had remembered that much. He'd washed his hair. And I'm thinking, okay, well, gosh, they must have had a really fast Sunday at Margies Candy, and like got out and like got in the booth and they're eating with the ladies and fooling around and all that stuff. And they get back and they go to Sahara. Like, okay, the timing's not working here. Like, that to me last night at 2 a.m. after 11 years of wondering about this finally came home to me. Like, that didn't happen. None of the Beatles ever talk about it. None of the gossip columns, none of the newspapers, photos, other people coming forward besides the Margie Candy owner. Like, yeah, I was one of the girls, or yeah, I was outside on the street. Nobody. So I kind of put it to rest. I mean, the whole thing about the segregation thing, that's a whole nother podcast. We don't probably have time for that. But the segregation thing is absolutely, I completely debunk that. Like, everybody thinks the segregation started, the insertion into the rider was for the Jacksonville show. Nothing of the kind. It was in the rider in April of 1964. 5 months before the show. Everyone knew that show was going to be integrated. And the Beatles had that segregation statement in their rider, clause in their rider, 464, 465, 466. The Beatles only needed that clause for America only. No other place they played, in Europe, Asia, Australia, did they need the segregation clause. It was only in North America.
Did that hold in Philly?
Did that hold in Philly?
Yeah. Did they adhere to that?
Yes, they had to.
Because
there's blacks and whites intermixed with crowd photos in Philly. Now, is it mostly a white audience? Absolutely.
Yeah.
It's majority white kids.
I've read stuff about Frank Rizzo, who had been the police chief and became the mayor. That he wasn't having the segregation thing. He wanted it segregated.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Good evening, 11 p.m. Here is the late hour news. Ed Pettit reporting. What began as a minor traffic dispute last night in a Negro section of Philadelphia has since resulted in rioting and looting with damage running to more than $500,000. The mayor has imposed a round-the-clock curfew with penalty of 2 years in jail for violation, but it's being largely ignored. Trouble continues in spite of the best effort of Negro leaders who say it's hoodlum-inspired. Here's a late report from the scene by John Schubeck.
Despite the efforts of more than 1,500 law enforcement officers, efforts to quell rioting and looting in North Philadelphia have not been successful. A rash of police injuries have been reported, and the arrest total has now climbed above the 200 mark. But as yet, it's been impossible to prevent outbreaks of rock throwing, looting, window breaking, and attacks on police. This is John Schubeck reporting from Philadelphia.
The Beatles had the kids jumping again tonight at Forest Hills, Queens, but aside from the noise, it all passed without incident, and welcome relief it was for police, who for 2 days now have been trying to keep the girls from invading the Delmonico Hotel at Park and 59th to get a glimpse of their favorites. Next stop, Atlantic City. Lucy Baines Johnson says she'll head back to Washington before the Beatles invade.
And Frank Rizzo got tickets because he said, I'm Frank Rizzo and I can get any tickets I want. But yeah, I mean, they adhered to it in every city. And the Gator Bowl, I mean, they were having integrated football games. Blacks and whites were sitting together as early as 1960. Now, that was the first rock concert at the Gator Bowl ever. So I imagine back in the day, and this is when the tour was planned, you're talking the spring of 64, before the Civil Rights Act passed. It's just now starting to get introduced in Congress. The discussions for the Civil Rights Act began on February 10th, 1964, the day after the Beatles performed on Ed Sullivan. The first discussions on it. And by July, all the tour and everything's set. By April. Contracts are signed. April, it's done. Mid-April, it's over. It's set in stone. Everyone knows you're going to have an integrated concert. Civil Rights Act doesn't pass till July. So prior to that, everyone's still operating under Jim Crow laws in the South from February to what if they've done before, prior to July. The Civil Rights Act's passed. Now, does every town in America in the South adhere to the Civil Rights Act? No, it's slowly eroding. That's why Brian couldn't do a show in Montgomery, Alabama. He had checked that on the list. I want to do a show in Montgomery, Alabama, right after Jacksonville. That show didn't go off because there was a governor at the time by the name of George Wallace, who was a strict segregationist. He just didn't want to cause this flap up. Like, he probably legally could have done it, but with George Wallace being the governor, probably wouldn't happen, and he just scrapped it. Same with Charlotte, North Carolina. They wanted to do a show there. Charlotte, North Carolina, the schools didn't get integrated until 1970. They just didn't want to cause this big flap up in America. And so that's why some of those things were done. So what I imagine what happened at the Gator Bowl was that was a city-owned, municipal-owned stadium. And I imagine the city council, the mayor at the time were kind of segregationists and like, yeah, they can have their Civil Rights Act, but we're slowly kind of getting this Jim Crow law eroded. And by that time, it's like, we don't have any power over this. The promoters already knew it was going to be integrated. Back in April, they signed a writer. And so the show went off, but there was this big flap up in Vegas and, it's going to be integrated. And then the Beatles obviously took a stand on it. But the people that don't get the credit for the integration clause in the contract that never get talked about, Brian Epstein and Norman Weiss. Norman Weiss being the vice president of General Artists Corporation, a Jewish man. Brian Epstein, a Jewish gay man. Those two planned the tours, not the Beatles. The Beatles were told where they were going to go. Norman and Brian did it. And what's interesting is all during this time, during the planning of the tour in March and April, the first stories start appearing in the New York Times of African-American artists wanting to play before desegregated audiences. And white artists finally backing them up. People like Vladimir Horowitz, Leonard Bernstein, people like that had a lot of clout. So it's so interesting that all this was going on in New York. Of course, Norman Weiss is right there in New York. He's in the entertainment business. He's dealing with us all the time. And all of a sudden, black artists are standing up and they're saying, we're done with segregated audiences. We want to play before integrated audiences. So I'm thinking it's kind of was in the thinking of Norman to put this clause, to present it to Brian and say, I think we should do this. And Brian, being a gay Jewish man facing his own discrimination in his life, said, that's a great idea. And then the Beatles backing them up. Because we're not used to this. Like, why? We play before integrated audience in England. This is totally foreign to us. We've had black artists on our stage, whatever. And they toured with an African-American touring act, the Exciters, Frogman Henry. And they told the people at the Jacksonville hotel they were going to stay at the George Washington Hotel, hey, if you won't allow everyone to stay here, guess what? We're canceling our reservations, which they did. And they flew to Boston that night.
George? Yeah? I understand from here you're going later on this month, next month, rather, you're going down south. I understand you're pretty against segregation down there. Yeah. Hotel, you're going to stay in Jackson.
If we have trouble in a hotel, pardon?
Yeah, we understood there were some problems about the hotel you might stay in Jackson.
I don't know. We don't know about accommodation at all. We don't arrange that. But, we don't appear anywhere where there is. No, we want to, half of our show is beautiful, but anyway.
No.
Gosh, we got that through. Jeez. I thought we were just good. Anyways.
Brilliant. Anybody who hasn't seen Sunday Best, the documentary on Netflix, Ed Sullivan, another guy who's just getting credit for what he did fighting that good fight ahead of his time and at great personal risk. Yes. Absolutely. So, well done for adding those two names to the conversation. But thank you. That was wonderful.
You're welcome. Thank you.
How are the Beatles enjoying their tour here in America?
Very much, thank you. Hello.
Yeah, that's great.
Having a great time. Me too.
How come you're not hitting more southern cities on this tour?
We don't know. It's not up to us where we go. We just climb in the vans.
Question here for Ringo.
I'd like to ask Ringo, I understand that you like country and western music. I was wondering if the Beatles have any plans of recording in Nashville.
I do like country and western, but we have no plans of recording in Nashville.
If the Beatles could attend someone else's concert, what artists would they go and see?
There's lots of them, you know. Lots. Yeah, the Apollo or something like that. I'd like to go to the Apollo and see everybody that goes there.
Okay, I have a question for all the Beatles here. Would be, if you were sitting at home listening to some record album of other recording artists, who are some of the American recording artists that you prefer?
Otis Redding's one. Yeah. There's lots of them.
Nina Simone.
James Brown, right? There's hundreds of them. There's many, many.
Is this the Beatles' last tour?
No.
Something About the Beatles. Created and hosted by Robert Rodriguez. Executive producer Rick Way. Title song performed by the Corgis. Something About the Beatles is an evergreen podcast.
Everything on the